Police officers of Reddit, who's the smartest criminal you've ever encountered? Most of them are really stupid, so this guy isn't a criminal mastermind, but here goes. He wanted to rob a jeweler's on our city's main street. So he found out the flat beside the jeweler's was empty and he hid there. For 2 weeks he triggered the alarm on purpose several times a night. Massive headache for the police and the business. We turned up to see nothing there. Nothing on cameras. Thought it was just a fluke, so the jewelers turned off the alarm system and said they'd wait until the morning to get a new one installed or that one rewired because something wasn't right. As soon as he heard that and the police leaving, he tore down the wall, had already been working on this apparently, and robbed the place taking his sweet time. Escaped without anyone noticing anything for hours. Until the jewelers came back in the morning. Then he tried to resell something he stole which had a serial number on it and got caught. So not that smart after all. Good effort though. He did all the hard work pretty well. A friend of my brother moved to Israel where for a period of time is acceptable to drive with an American driver's license. He was pulled over for speeding. And when asked for his license, gave the officer his Costco card. Costco is a membership-based retail warehouse in the US and a few other countries. The exchange apparently went something like this: Officer, Costco? What is Costco? Friend, it's the state I'm from. Officer, that sounds made up. Friend, there are lots of states you probably haven't heard of. Have you heard of Arkansas? How about Idaho? Officer, I guess not. Friend, well, I'm from the small state of Costco. The officer didn't have a response and wound up writing the ticket to someone with a Costco driver's license. Friend framed the ticket and still has it hanging on his wall. Reminds me of a family friend of mine. Very funny Australian with an absolutely horrendous bogan accent. Well, late 80s, he's driving through Texas and runs a red light. And is immediately pulled over by a 250-pound Texan police officer with an equally horrendous accent. The way the stories goes, this man is obviously not the brightest chap. So our friend, when asked about running the red light, gets very apologetic and explains that he gets easily confused because in Australia, you know how things are revers down there. Red means go and green means stop. The cop actually let this man go with a warning. I did not know that. Well, in America, red means stop, so don't make this mistake again. Well, there was this one guy. Well, call him Jack. Now, Jack stole stuff but also involved a lot of people. One time, he was planning to steal a whole bunch of cars. All luxury cars. So what he did was he got his people to call 911, etc., from all different places and countries, to tell them that car theft was taking place in multiple places. Oh, he also only used a few people each time. So it was different voices, people, locations, etc. So the police went each time. Until he actually did the crime. Then no one came. He was never caught. When the owner of those cars came, the police didn't believe him. 10 out of 10, genius right there. He sort of used the boy who cried wolf story in real life to his advantage. The damn wolf learned to cry wolf. The story goes like this: a homeowner walks out one morning to drive to work only to find his car missing. He reports the car stolen to police. A few days later, his car is sitting back in front of his house. When he gets inside, he finds a note. It was an apology that said the thief was in dire need of quick transportation and so he borrowed the first car he found with the keys inside. The writer noticed the sticker on the car for the local sports team. And just so there were no hard feelings, he left 4 tickets to an upcoming game in the glove box for the homeowner and his family. So the homeowner and his family attend the game. But when they return home, they find the house has been ransacked and all items of value are gone. Edit: some of you have noted this as an urban legend. Which is true. It is also true that some urban legends have a basis in fact. There was a guy with over 50 speeding charges. With the name Prawo Jazdi. He was in a different car. With a different disguise every single time. Eventually, after the government set up a special task force to take down this guy, they realized that Prawo Jazdi means driver's license in Polish. Clarification: it was 50 different people. The police just wrote down their name as Prawo Jazdi every time someone with a Polish driver's license was caught speeding. It is very similar to Phantom of Heilbronn. German police were looking for a serial killer who had left DNA traces at over 40 crime scenes all over Europe, only to find that the DNA belonged to a woman who worked at the factory that made the cotton swabs used for collecting DNA samples. Jesus Christ, that would be so deflating to be working that case and come to that conclusion. Pretty clever for the serial killer to get a job at the cotton swab factory. Imagine how long she must have been planning her serial killing career for to play that long game. Can you imagine if that's actually what happened? Being sure there's no way this con would ever work. Then some senior detective figures out your thinly veiled ploy and throws his mug at the wall and gives up on the whole case. There's a small tourist town where I grew up that is divided in half by a big river. The only way between the two sides is over a long bridge. Unless you go all the way around another mountain pass. These guys called in, like, 2 to 3 bomb threats to a posh hotel on one side of the bridge. I think they even left some dummy packages. All the police went across the bridge to do crowd control, etc., etc. The guys then called in a bomb threat on the bridge and started robbing stuff on the other side. The police couldn't be positive the bomb threat was real or not and hesitated long enough to give the thieves a head start. I first heard this story about 10 years ago. In Banff, Alberta. Never bothered to look up what was real versus what is invented. I think this is pretty close. But as my father used to say, you can't let truth get in the way of a good story. Wow, 24K upvotes? Thanks folks. Folded hands. If it was my town, I'd put police stations on both sides. But that would probably cost more money than they have. Working in a home improvement store when younger. This guy came in, went to the snow blowers, took one and went to the return desk. Said he wanted to return it but had no receipt. They told him you need a receipt, so he says okay, I'll be back, and wheels it off to car through the front door. He did this a few times apparently. Couple places even helped him load it back into his car. Had a guy try that with the big expensive bedding sets at Sears back 20 years ago. He came up the escalator empty-handed, walked into the first aisle, and came out carrying the set. He said he wanted to return it. I said I needed a receipt, and when he asked why, I explained, well, sometimes we have issues with people coming up here, taking stuff off the shelves and trying to return it. He got a bit squirrely, looked around kinda panicked and left with it. On the way to the door, security started following him, so he threw it at them and sprinted out the door. Obligatory, not a cop. But close on 20 years ago now, a guy on Australia's Gold Coast got away with a bank robbery in broad daylight. He cased the bank for a while and discovered a pattern of the bank manager arriving about 30 minutes before anyone else each morning, where he would leave the front doors unlocked so staff could help themselves in without a key or needing to wait for the boss to come and let them in. One morning the crook dressed himself up for a busy day of office work and waited for the bank manager to arrive. As the manager was unlocking the doors, he made his move, entering the building and threatening the manager with a gun. He got all the details he'd need to access the vault and so forth, and then tied the manager up and stuffed him in his office. When the staff arrived, he told them that the manager had called in sick and that regional office had sent him in to do the open shop thing, and no one batted an eyelid. This bank had a small walk-in vault that normally only held about 30 to 50K on any given day, but old mate had timed his robbery for the morning after business banking day, when all the local small businesses would make their end-of-week deposits, and reportedly got a score of close to 250K. Once the vault was open, he pulled his gun out and invited all the staff to enter the vault and locked them in. By this stage the bank was due to be opened, so when he went to leave there were a number of customers waiting to get inside to do their banking. He told them all that there had been an issue with the computers and that the tech team had estimated it would take about 30 minutes before the issue would be resolved, and that they couldn't open until then. Then he got into his car and drove straight to the airport and flew to Hong Kong and then disappeared. To my knowledge, the cops never caught him and never managed to find the money. They knew he'd have had to leave most of it in Australia somewhere, because you can only take 10K AUD in cash in any currency out of the country before customs pulls you into their interview rooms, so the assumption was that he had to have an accomplice here who would funnel the money to him slowly over time. Edit, for those wondering. He was identified later after witness statement and CCTV led to his getaway car being discovered at the airport, where he boarded a plane destined for Hong Kong, which is as far as they could track him. That's a lot of trust to put in one person who's in another country from you. And with leverage over you. It'd be really smart in this situation to use an immigrant from Hong Kong to funnel the money back. Ideally an immigrant with family back in Hong Kong. Funnel the payments as sending money to your family back home. Which is super common anyways. The thief gives a percentage to the family or maintains their lifestyle in exchange for the transfers. Now the funneler has leverage over the thief in the form of his known whereabouts. The thief has leverage over the funneler by taking care of the latter's family. Mutually assured destruction if either ever flips. This guy funnels money. Plot twist, he's the accomplice. A famous Australian underworld figure named Tony Mockbel fled the country when police were looking for him. He used online gambling accounts as international bank accounts, so that's always an option. Homeless guy in my hometown figured out if he committed some act of petty theft he'd get a night in jail. A warm place to sleep and a hot meal. He'd show up, turn in his stolen goods, and that would be that. After a while the police would just tell him to take back whatever he stole the next day. Quite the town character. Lots of people try to get arrested on purpose for the same reason. I've done it before. To try to escape an abusive relationship. FYI, trying to get arrested is super fun. Edit, this is my biggest post, wow haha. To answer the questions I'm getting all in one place, yes, I escaped from that guy 3 or 4 years ago. To get arrested I'd just be really careless. I was homeless, an addict and mentally ill and very sad and angry, so I'd just let those emotions out. I'd drink in public, and when I got caught I'd throw my drink at the cops. If they ever tried to detain me I'd fight back. I was barely 100 pounds at the time. Couldn't do much harm luckily. Breaking things, stealing things, getting in fights I knew I'd lose. I'd usually just go in for like a weekend or a few days or whatever, and he'd always be at the doors waiting for me when I got out. The ladies in jail I met always took care of me, and I met some wonderful people. Luckily I'm a white woman living in Canada, so nothing escalated to me being harmed. I realize I have a ton of privilege to be able to act a damn fool in front of cops and live to tell the tale with no serious lasting repercussions. Not a police officer, but was in RA in college. My university owned all the houses adjacent to campus. These were ran like dorms. With RAS and the same rules, which included a very strict no alcohol policy. It was a privilege to live in the houses. And priority was given to upperclassmen who were more likely to bend that rule because they were of age, and it was harder to police off campus in houses. There was a student who went around knocking on doors saying something like, "I'm in RA and housing director's name sent me for health and wellness checks." She'd find their booze, take it, and follow up with how she's doing them a favor by just giving them a warning. She wasn't actually in RA and was just keeping the booze for herself. The only reason she got found out was because she did it to an actual RA. The RA was male, they kept men and women housing separate, and just assumed he didn't know her because of that. It was only later he questioned why they had a female doing wellness checks on male housing. They did an investigation and asked other residents. Incidents dated back previous 2 years. Never found out who it was. Haha. My buddies and I did this to the freshmen when we were upperclassmen in college. The look on their scared little faces was priceless. Just carry a clipboard and a Keurig carabiner and no one asked questions. Probably someone who committed a crime I never solved. With that being said, I had a guy use a sledgehammer to smash his way through a wall at a Best Buy and steal a bunch of phones and cameras. He was smart enough to wear gloves and a face mask and not touch anything he didn't have to. Alarms didn't go off until he exited out the back door, which the alarm company gets after a minute or two and takes them like 3/4 of a minute to call into us. Giving him a good 5-minute head start, so he was probably a few miles away before we got dispatched to it. He clearly scoped out the area before doing his deed too. Smart dude. Edit, so part of the building was built into a hill. So the hole was on the back side of the building along the grade line, but when you're inside the building it was about 8 feet up. So it was easier for him to leave out a door. Also, the wall section where he broke through was hollow cement block. The portion of the wall below that was poured concrete. A guy, let's call him Dave, I worked with told this story. He was working at a Mercedes dealership. He was sitting at his desk when this well-dressed gentleman comes in and asks if he could test drive a specific car that was parked out front. It was also a busy day. Usually they are allowed to let people test drive by themselves after they have taken some form of a deposit or something, maybe the official ID or something. Not really relevant. So Dave gives out the keys. The guy goes on his test drive and comes back a reasonable amount of time later. He walks in and hands off the key. Gets his deposit, whatever, back. This was about closing time. Even possibly on a Friday. Everything is in order. Fast forward to the next business day. Dave's boss walks in and realizes that one of the Mercedes out front is gone. Dave has to explain that the car was returned and that they have the key and everything. Turns out the criminal didn't test drive. He drove somewhere to create a replica of the key and gave that replica back to the desk. He kept the real key. That smart son of a bitch. Edit, Dave is not the criminal. He is the employee. Apparently people think Dave is the criminal laughing face. Edit 2, it was probably part of this group. Edit 3, okay, maybe the key wasn't copied but switched or something. I didn't put much thought into the details of the story since Dave told me this story a few years ago. I also don't know much about key security on modern cars. What did you think about this video? Did you like it? Please leave some feedback in the comment section below. You can always check out my other videos for more curated content just like this. Thanks for watching. See you next time.